My cousin Elise gave her daughter a fistful of diuretics before a beauty pageant, then disappeared while the girl collapsed from a heart attack on stage. When I finally found Elise and begged her to come clean, she clutched her chest and wheezed. "She's been following me, threatening me." I just stared at her. That was 6 weeks ago. This morning, she was in court, sobbing into her lawyer's shoulder. Elise has always been obsessed with beauty pageants. Since childhood, our mother pushed her into competitions, and because Elise was naturally beautiful, she usually walked away with the crown. But she got pregnant at 18, and in her own words, her body never recovered. So the spotlight faded for her, but that only meant it had to shine on her daughter. The moment little Tessa could walk, she was shoved into oversized heels and made to parade in gowns that dragged on the floor. She was 4, sitting upright in a corset, hands delicately folded on her lap like some Victorian royal. It was unsettling. Elise's husband, Marcus, actually filed for divorce when Tessa was 5. She'd secretly entered their daughter into a pageant while Marcus was away on a business trip. When he returned, he walked in on Elise scolding their child for placing second. Still, Elise spun a convincing lie and walked away with full custody. You're probably wondering why I didn't step in sooner. Fair question. The truth is, I was living overseas and had no real grasp of what was going on. I genuinely feel awful. I didn't learn the full scope until recently. Tessa was 10 by then. She just qualified for a major pageant, the kind with all the top-tier contestants. Apparently, Elise ramped up the pressure like never before. She restricted Tessa to fewer than 800 calories a day. Horrifying, especially for a child in the middle of critical development. Elise made her exercise in full-body sauna suits. Yes, a 10-year-old. And loaded her up with more supplements than Brian Johnson probably takes in a week. From what I now know, Tessa would collapse, drop to her knees, and beg for a break. Elise would just silently point at the treadmill. I didn't realize how dire things were until Elise called me. I could hear the treadmill humming and a loud crash in the background, but I assumed she was working out. She told me she had fantastic news. I hadn't been home in almost 2 years, and she insisted I return on a specific day for a party. Later, I found out that party was supposed to celebrate Tessa winning the big pageant. I scrambled to get time off and flew back, 16 hours straight. But when I landed, it wasn't Elise who picked me up. It was Marcus. I'd never even spoken to him before. Naturally, I was confused. "Why are you here?" I asked. He just said, "You need to see something." He led me to his car, and for a minute, I wondered if I was about to star in some grainy kidnapping video. I almost wished that had been the case, because the truth was far worse. He drove me to the hospital. When we entered the room, I saw Tessa, 10 years old, so gaunt she looked like a skeleton wrapped in skin. Her eyes were sunken, deep purple beneath them, fingers as thin as string. She was hooked up to IVs and barely stable. I rushed to her bedside, horrified, and when I turned back to Marcus, I saw tears streaming down his face. This tall, stoic man weeping. I was frozen, unsure how to comfort him. I just sat there, awkwardly holding his shoulder for half an hour until he managed to tell me what happened. He'd been overseas for the past 2 months for work. Elise had been training Tessa the entire time, lying to Marcus the whole way. In addition to the starvation and sauna suits, 3 days before the competition, Elise cut Tessa's food entirely. Nothing, only water. Her goal? To make sure every single rib was visible. Every single rib. As if that wasn't enough, just hours before the pageant, Elise gave Tessa a handful of strong diuretics. If you don't know, diuretics dehydrate the body rapidly, and one of the known side effects is sudden cardiac arrest. And Elise gave her a handful of them. So, of course, what you think happened, did. When Tessa stepped onto the stage, the bright lights were too much. Her body couldn't keep up anymore, and her heart just stopped. She collapsed in her heels, toppled off the stage, and hit the ground 3 feet below. She landed right on her neck. Miraculously, it's only sprained. Doctors say there shouldn't be any long-term damage. But still, my niece had a heart attack, on stage. And where was Elise? Nowhere. No one could find her. She vanished. She wasn't there when the paramedics arrived. She didn't show up at the hospital. She hasn't been to visit once. The only reason Marcus even found out was because Elise, Tessa's emergency contact, never answered the hospital's calls. After 25 attempts, they finally contacted Marcus, who caught the first flight home. Right now, I'm sitting at Tessa's hospital bedside. It looks like she's going to make it, thank God. But I've told the whole family what happened. We're all searching for Elise, and when we find her... The monitor beside me kept a soft, steady rhythm as I held Tessa's tiny hand, feeling bones no child should ever have visible beneath skin this fragile. Ryan paced the room behind me, his steps repeating across the linoleum. Neither of us said the truth out loud, but we both knew it. Elise had given enough diuretics to incapacitate a grown adult. My phone buzzed, an unknown number. I nearly ignored it, but something told me to check. The nurse was adjusting the IV when the message came through. "How's my baby?" Elise. Of course, she was using a burner. The nurse gave me a kind smile and said something about how devoted we were, staying with Tessa all this time. I forced a smile and nodded, while Elise's message scorched my phone screen. My hands trembled as I typed, "Where are you? She almost died." Just as I hit send, the door opened. A woman in a tailored blazer stepped in, clipboard in hand. Our badge read, "Child Protective Services." She must have overheard my outburst from the hallway. Her gaze scanned between Ryan and me, settling on my flushed face and shaking fingers. She needed to ask some questions about the child's care, she said calmly, starting with why you seem so emotionally unstable around a vulnerable patient. Ryan tried to speak, but she raised her hand to quiet him. Her attention didn't waver from me, the one who'd lost composure in a children's ward. A knock interrupted us. The hospital chaplain stepped in, holding a clear plastic bag. Inside was a child's glittering pageant dress and a few accessories. "I need a family member to sign for her belongings," he said softly. But then his brow furrowed. "I'm sorry, only Elise Warren is listed as authorized to receive these belongings, unless you have legal documentation stating otherwise." Ryan's jaw tensed. We both knew he could forge Elise's signature in his sleep. He'd seen it on custody documents too many times. But in front of CPS? That would destroy any sliver of credibility we had left. My phone buzzed again, a text from Elise's neighbor. There was movement inside her house. Someone was definitely there. My heart pounded. This might be it, our chance to confront her, get answers, maybe even collect proof of what she'd done to Tessa. But then the beeping monitor accelerated, and a nurse burst in. Tessa needed to be rushed for a brain scan. The swelling from the fall was worse than they had thought. I looked from Ryan to my phone to Tessa's pale face being prepared for transport. "Go," Ryan whispered. "I'll stay with her." But I couldn't. I shook my head. Whatever might be waiting at Elise's house, it wasn't worth missing even 1 second if something went wrong during that scan. I followed the gurney through the hallway, watching my niece disappear into the cavernous MRI machine. 2 hours. 2 hours in that waiting room, knowing Elise was probably back at her house, wiping away every shred of evidence. My phone lit up non-stop, notifications pouring in. Elise's Facebook had suddenly come to life, post after post of old photos, each one captioned with things like, "Praying for my angel," "God, give me strength during this difficult time." The comments came flooding in, sympathy from pageant moms, prayers from women at church, offers of meals and help from people who had no idea what she'd really done. Every post was meticulously timed, flawlessly written, painting her as the picture of a devoted mother in crisis. When we were finally allowed back into the hospital room, 3 different emergencies hit us at once. Tessa's blood pressure had dropped dangerously. The nurse called for the attending physician while Ryan tried gently shaking her awake, whispering her name over and over. Amid the chaos, my phone rang, a number I didn't recognize. "This is Carolyn Heller from Heller and Grange. I represent Elise Warren in relation to custody matters. I understand you've been making serious allegations." I hung up. Elise had already lawyered up. Of course she had. Before I could even fully register that, another official stepped into the room. Different badge, same government-issued clipboard. Child Protective Services again, this time for a formal interview. The woman's questions had shifted in tone, sharp now, more deliberate. She zeroed in on my connection to Tessa, on my time away, on how emotionally reactive I'd been since arriving. Yes, I'd been abroad for 2 years. No, I hadn't come home to visit. Yes, I'd only recently learned what had been going on. No, I didn't have concrete proof. So you had no idea your sister was struggling as a single mother? She asked, pen poised and ready. It was a trap. Say yes, and I looked negligent. Say no, and I looked like a liar. I tried explaining about the pageants, the starvation, the sauna suits, the diuretics, but without documentation or witnesses, it all sounded like secondhand hearsay, just an estranged aunt showing up out of nowhere and throwing around wild accusations. Then my phone buzzed again. Elise, this time from her regular number. At the hospital gift shop, picking something up for my baby. I didn't even think. I bolted, left a CPS worker mid-sentence. The gift shop was 3 floors down, and I flew down the stairs 2 at a time. When I burst through the door, there she was, Elise, at the counter, holding a teddy bear. She turned at the sound, and her entire face changed. Calm melted into full-blown panic. Her hands started shaking, her chest heaving. She dropped the stuffed animal. Please, she's been following me, threatening me. I just wanted to get something for my daughter. The guard stepped between us immediately, hand hovering near his radio. People stared. Elise's panic attack looked real, because it probably was. She'd always been terrifyingly good at pushing herself into genuine hysteria when things closed in. Ma'am, I need you to back up, the guard said firmly. I tried to explain, but Elise's cries only grew louder. Then another woman appeared, Victoria, one of the pageant moms from Elise's comments section. She rushed to Elise's side and wrapped an arm around her, glaring at me like I was a monster. Haven't you done enough? This poor woman is going through hell, and you're stalking her? The security guard was now calling for backup. I had no choice. I stepped away, retreating slowly, keeping my eyes on Elise as she leaned into Victoria's arms. The scene was perfect, exactly what she wanted. The devoted friend, the trembling mother, the unhinged relative causing a scene. My phone rang again as I stepped into the stairwell. It was Mom. What is going on? Elise just called me, sobbing. She said you're having another breakdown, like when your father died. She's really worried about you, sweetheart. We all are. The words hit like a gut punch. Another breakdown, like when Dad died. Elise was already laying the groundwork, reminding everyone of how I'd unraveled 2 years ago, convinced something unnatural had caused Dad's death, desperate for someone to blame. Mom, she's lying. She nearly killed Tessa. She gave her— Stop. Her voice was sharp, controlled. Just stop. I know you're upset about Tessa's accident, but accusing your sister of trying to hurt her own child?
This is just like last time. You need help. Then the line went dead. I stood frozen in the stairwell, realizing just how carefully Elise had orchestrated everything. Every action I took would be filtered through the story she'd already sold. Me, the unstable aunt, absent for years, now crashing into a family crisis with wild, paranoid accusations. Back in the room, Ryan was on the phone, voice low and tense. From what I gathered, he was speaking with his ex-wife, arguing about missed responsibilities, about how this wasn't his family to get tangled in. When he hung up, he looked wrecked. She says if I'm not home by tomorrow, she's filing for separation. Says she won't have our kids around this kind of chaos. The CPS worker had left a business card on the windowsill. There'd be follow-up interviews, formal investigations, all focused on family dynamics, on my absence, on Elise's long-documented role as a hard-working single mom juggling multiple jobs and raising her daughter alone, all while putting her through pageants out of love and pride. Then came the notification. Local news had picked up the story. Not the abuse. No, just the dramatic collapse at a children's pageant and the family dispute that followed. Someone had recorded me confronting Elise at the hospital gift shop. The video was exactly what she needed. It showed me storming toward her, Elise backing away, crying, clutching her chest. A woman in distress. A sister, unhinged. As night fell, Tessa's condition remained unchanged. Ryan left to try and fix what was left of his marriage, promising to return at first light. I stayed. Sitting beside my niece's bed, holding her frail hand, watching the monitors hum along. Every second I stayed here was another second Elise had to strengthen her narrative, polish her role. The bag from the pageant photographer sat in the corner where Ryan had dropped it earlier. Through the clear vinyl, I could make out the edge of a memory card. Photos from before the show. What Tessa looked like just hours, maybe minutes before she collapsed. Evidence. But I didn't move. I couldn't. Tampering with that bag would destroy any chance of those photos holding weight in a courtroom. It would also give Elise's lawyer exactly what they needed. A desperate, unstable woman willing to compromise evidence for a personal vendetta. Then my phone buzzed. Another text. Unknown number. You should check the Prayers for Pageant Princess page. I did. The Facebook group had exploded. The video of me confronting Elise had been posted over and over again. The comments were brutal. People calling for restraining orders, for me to be barred from the hospital. Comments saying someone needed to protect that poor mother from her insane sister. I recognized names. Neighbors. People I grew up with. People now joining Elise's performance, taking her side over mine. She had won this round. But as I looked down at Tessa's face, at the bruises faintly visible under her hospital gown, at the IV drip pushing nutrition back into a starved body, I knew I wasn't going to quit. Tomorrow would be another war. Emergency contacts would need updating, something only Elise could authorize. Insurance questions would need answers, decisions only the custodial parent could make. Everything in place to protect children had now become her weapon. But for now, I just sat with Tessa. I held her hand. I whispered promises I wasn't sure I could keep, that she was safe now, that I wouldn't let this happen again, that somehow I'd find a way to prove what her mother had done to her. The machines ticked steadily through the dark, each beep a countdown to Elise's next move. The morning brought an unexpected visitor. A man stood in the doorway, holding a small bouquet of flowers. His expression shifted from sympathy to confusion as he saw me alone with Tessa. I'm Mark. Elise asked me to stop by. She said she had something urgent to deal with, but wanted to check on her daughter. He placed the flowers carefully on the table, eyes flicking between the monitors and Tessa's still frame with genuine concern. Then he mentioned he'd met Elise 3 weeks ago, at a grief counseling group. My stomach turned. I'd been seeing that same grief counselor for over 2 years, ever since Dad passed. And that counselor had a brother named Mark. Elise had somehow found out. She'd inserted herself into that space, the one place I had thought was safe from her reach. Mark went on, quoting something about resilience, words I recognized from my own sessions. Then he said Elise liked to read The Giving Tree to help process her emotions. That had been Tessa's favorite bedtime story.
Hospital security came by to review the incident in the gift shop from the day before. They showed me footage from multiple camera angles, each one offering a slightly different perspective. In one view, I appeared to be pursuing Elise. In another, taken just moments before, Elise seemed to be the one trailing me. It turned out we'd both entered the shop at different times, just close enough together to blur the timeline. It supported both of our claims of being stalked. The head of security recommended we avoid shared spaces moving forward, just to prevent further escalation. Later, I found a message on my phone I had forgotten about, a text I'd sent Elise 2 years ago during one of my darker moments. In it, I praised her parenting. I'd written about how amazed I was by her devotion to Tessa, how much she gave up, how I could never do what she did. She had screenshotted it back then, Now she was circulating it to relatives as proof that even I had acknowledged her as a selfless, loving mother. My own words were being turned into ammunition against me. The sound of Tessa stirring pulled my attention away. Her eyelids fluttered open. She looked at me, then scanned the room. "Why didn't Mom come with the ambulance?" she whispered. "She said she would." That one small question, spoken with such innocence, said more than any accusation ever could. Elise had abandoned her daughter at her most critical moment. She broke a promise to a terrified little girl. Word traveled through the hospital staff. Quiet murmurs passed along like gossip. Apparently, the pageant venue had installed doorbell cameras 2 months earlier. They captured everyone who entered or exited the building that day. But there was a problem. The venue's owner was Mark's mother. She hadn't reviewed the footage yet. She said she wanted to speak with her son first, which meant another crucial piece of evidence was now potentially under Elise's growing influence. Child Protective Services returned with their preliminary report. The social worker explained that my claims could be seen as an effort to alienate Tessa from her mother during a time of medical trauma. Without definitive proof, they were forced to interpret my accusations as emotional speculation. In contrast, Elise was viewed as a parent who'd consistently provided support, routine, and stability. Then, during the shuffle of shift change, I noticed something on a partially completed form Ryan had left near the bedside. A password hint for the patient portal. Elise's favorite pageant win date. I took a risk, entered the portal before she could change anything. I added myself and Ryan to the emergency contact list. I knew it wouldn't last, Elise would notice, but every moment mattered. Meanwhile, Elise's social media presence only intensified. Her Instagram stories painted the picture of a grieving, exhausted mother taking brief moments of peace in spas, cafes, and prayer groups. The timestamps and locations seemed strategically placed, but I looked closer. One spa she tagged, the one where she said she was releasing grief in nature, had removed all its outdoor lounge furniture 2 weeks ago. It was visible in her photo. The resort's website confirmed it. She was posting from old photos, crafting fake alibis, sloppily. Then my therapist called. She'd received a subpoena for my records. The request focused specifically on sessions where I'd spoken about envy toward Elise, how her life looked so perfect while mine unraveled after Dad's death. I remembered those sessions clearly. Those honest, raw conversations would now be twisted into legal evidence, proof of jealousy, of emotional instability. I tried to trap Elise by saving one of her voicemails. She'd called while I was in the bathroom and left a message, casual on the surface but laced with veiled threats. I activated my phone's recording feature to save it, but somehow she must have noticed the notification. She called back immediately. Her tone flipped. Suddenly she was worried, concerned about my mental health. Her voice, trained from years of pageant coaching, shifted so smoothly it was like watching an actor change roles mid-scene. Later that afternoon, hospital security detained me again. Elise had shown up, once again playing the role of the loving, concerned mother. She said she just wanted to pick up some of Tessa's personal belongings to make her feel safe when she woke up. I blocked her path to the room. Security interpreted my behavior as aggressive. In questioning, Elise's performance was impeccable. She pleaded with them, said all she wanted was her daughter's favorite stuffed animal, just something familiar to comfort her. They gave me a warning, and they let her walk out with a bag of Tessa's things. Afterward, one of the nurses, someone who had quietly supported me, found me during her break. She pulled me aside, eyes darting around to make sure no one was watching. She told me that the hospital's administration had received an anonymous complaint. It accused the nursing staff of violating HIPAA laws by discussing Tessa's condition outside formal medical notes. They were being investigated now, too. Elise wasn't just defending herself, she was burning the ground beneath anyone who got in her way.
Her job was on the line. She couldn't risk her family's income just to keep helping me. One more ally gone, lost to Elise's calculated campaign. Meanwhile, Elise's social media took a darker turn. One photo showed her wearing Tessa's pageant crown, seated on her daughter's bed. The stuffed animals had been carefully arranged in neat rows, as if they were an audience watching her perform. She was living out some twisted fantasy while her real daughter lay unconscious in a hospital room. Then came an offer from Elise's lawyer, a supervised visit, 2 hours with Tessa, if I publicly admitted to misjudging the situation and acknowledged Elise as a dedicated, loving mother. The agreement came with paperwork, a signed statement that could be used in future custody proceedings. If I refused, I'd be portrayed as someone who prioritized pride over a child's recovery. I refused. Immediately, Elise weaponized that decision. Her social media filled with veiled posts about family members who care more about being right than about healing, and how grief brings out hidden bitterness in some people. Parenting groups picked it up. Comments flooded in, sharing stories of jealous relatives and toxic family drama during times of crisis. Elise had successfully reframed everything, from abuse to a tragic story of family dysfunction. Then came a discovery that shifted the timeline completely. The pageant Tessa had collapsed at wasn't the finals like I'd believed. It was only a preliminary. Brian had found the entry receipts in his email. 3 different competitions were scheduled that month alone. The pressure and abuse hadn't been building to a single event. It had been a sustained campaign, a pattern. We learned something else from a school counselor. Tessa had been keeping a diary. It was in her locker. It might hold first-hand accounts, notes, drawings, anything. But neither Brian nor I had legal access to retrieve it. We'd need Elise's permission or a court order. What I had once thought was evidence of forced training turned out to be far more complex. We found a video on Elise's shared cloud storage. In it, Tessa begged to train harder, pleaded for one more round, promised she'd do better if it meant making her mother proud. It shattered me. That kind of devotion, twisted into desperation, was not something that could be easily used in court. It made everything more fragile, more tragic. Then, my mother called, crying. She said she believed something had happened, but after losing Dad last year, the idea of being cut off from her only grandchild was too much. She couldn't choose sides, not openly. Elise stayed the devoted daughter. I became the problem. With my support system crumbling, desperation began to distort my judgment. I started documenting Elise's allies, photographing them outside their workplaces, mapping their routines, logging their vulnerabilities. The ethical lines I'd promised myself I wouldn't cross began to fade. Then fate gave me a strange opportunity. I spotted Elise's attorney sitting 3 tables away at a coffee shop, working on her laptop. I approached her as a stranger, a potential client, spinning a fictional custody situation. A story about a mentally unstable relative trying to take my child. She responded candidly, offering legal strategies, red flags to raise, phrases that judges respond to. I memorized every word. Elise's next moves were becoming clearer. Later, I found something on the shared cloud Elise used for pageant photos. Hidden among thousands of glittery stage shots were deleted training videos. They told the real story. The punishments, the screaming, the dizzy spells, the way Tessa's body visibly deteriorated over time. The metadata proved the videos were recorded over several months. This wasn't a one-time incident. It was long-term, systematic abuse. Just as we gained momentum, another complication landed at our feet. Elise's ex-boyfriend appeared with receipts, literal ones. He claimed Elise owed him thousands for pageant-related expenses. He had bank transfers, charges, all documented. His involvement added a new legal obstacle. His claims would need to be resolved before any changes to custody could happen. 2 battles, one against Elise, one against her debts, both draining time and money. Amid it all, I missed the psychological evaluation appointment for Tessa, the one the court had scheduled. I was handling the ex-boyfriend's financial complaints and combing through cloud files when it slipped past me. The court flagged it as a failure to appear. It became another mark against me, another point in Elise's narrative that I cared more about fighting her than protecting Tessa.
My savings disappeared faster than I'd imagined possible. Legal consultations, missed paychecks, travel, filing fees. It all drained the funds I'd spent years building. Meanwhile, Elise was spending freely from the joint account she managed for Tessa's expenses. She had financial access I couldn't match. The pressure mounted by the day. Then a confrontation at Tessa's favorite restaurant went viral, locally at least. A waitress who had served her birthday party months earlier posted about the unhinged family causing a scene. The post was meant to be humorous, but it painted us as unstable and chaotic. Gossip blogs picked it up, feeding Elise's carefully constructed image of family dysfunction. My remote job was the next to fall apart. Human Resources cited excessive personal distractions and client impact as reasons for termination. Only later did I learn that one of Elise's old pageant friends worked in that HR department. Just as legal fees peaked, I was left without income. I started sleeping in my car outside the hospital. Hotels were no longer an option, and I refused to leave Tessa alone, unprotected. Meanwhile, Elise posted photos of Tessa's bedroom makeover. New paint, fresh curtains, a caption, "Getting ready for a beautiful new chapter when baby girl comes home." The contrast was unbearable. Then came Mom's last plea. She called in tears, asking me to stop. She said she believed Elise was sick but insisted that she loved her daughter. That conversation revealed how deeply Elise had worked on her, positioning herself as the exhausted single mother, doing her best under impossible circumstances. My digging into the pageant world started hurting people I hadn't meant to touch. One coordinator I'd questioned about safety protocols was suspended while the investigation played out. Her daughter's dance classes were canceled, her income disappeared, then her husband filed for separation, citing the stress and shame from the public scandal. When I learned that she had attempted to take her own life, saved only because her daughter found her in time, it gutted me. Still, I kept going. I told myself that exposing the truth mattered more than any collateral damage, that justice for Tessa was worth the cost. But the person I was becoming, calculated, manipulative, relentless, wasn't someone I recognized anymore. Then Ryan asked me the question that haunted me for days. What if Elise just made a terrible mistake? What if your crusade is destroying Tessa's only chance of having a mother? I didn't answer for 13 full seconds, because I wasn't sure anymore. Eventually, I made a public post about my father's death, about how I missed the signs of his depression, how I'd been too distracted, too emotionally removed to see what he was going through. I'd hoped the admission would show how our family had a history of denying painful truths. Instead, it was spun to support Elise's story, that I had a habit of projecting blame onto others after tragedies, that I was still broken and irrational. Then we found a hospital document buried in the records. Tessa had complained of chest pains 2 weeks before the pageant. The school nurse documented it, Elise had been notified, but never followed up with a doctor. More damning, in my final phone call with Elise before the collapse, Tessa had mentioned feeling tired, and I hadn't asked a single question about her health. I missed it. That same week, Elise's attorney filed for an emergency hearing. The motion cited immediate threat to the child's stability due to interference by an emotionally volatile relative. They wanted the court date pushed up, 30 days. My attorney was tied up in another case. If I couldn't find new representation fast, I'd be forced to face that hearing alone. But then, the deeper truth behind Elise's behavior began to come into focus. She didn't just want custody. She needed to be recognized for raising Tessa on her own after the divorce and for surviving the cost of her own sacrificed dreams. In her mind, she had earned this legacy. Her love had fused with ambition, warping into something dangerous, a belief that she alone deserved Tessa's devotion, whatever it took. That belief made her reckless. So, I crossed the line I swore I never would. I befriended her yoga instructor, pretended to be interested in wellness, in healing, in personal growth, all while angling for insight into Elise's mindset. Each session was an act. Every smile, every conversation, a manipulation. I was no longer just fighting Elise. I was becoming her. Then came an unexpected source, the mother of Tessa's best friend. I'd been observing her at school pickup, casually chatting while staying alert for anything useful. She mentioned playdates, Tessa's stories, comments about her home life that stuck with her. It was information I could use, but it had been collected through deception that my old self, before all this, would have found appalling.
The supervised visitation felt like both a small victory and a crushing defeat. 2 hours at Tessa's bedside, silent, aching, both of us crying while she slept. We held hands across her motionless body, united by our love for her, but split by everything else. The image of that moment, our quiet grief over the same child, would haunt us both. Elise's counterclaim gained serious traction with the guardian ad litem. She alleged a dangerous obsession on my part, backed up with logs of my behavior. Every step I had taken in pursuit of justice was reframed as unhinged, unstable, potentially harmful to Tessa's recovery. Each move I made became a brick in the wall Elise was building around herself and against me. But everything now rested on one key witness, Tessa's teacher. She had documented concerns about weight loss and fatigue weeks before the collapse, noted behavioral changes. Those observations were the external validation we desperately needed. But teachers were discouraged from getting involved in custody disputes, and Elise had been a classroom volunteer and room parent for years. The pressure was real. Then came a twist I never saw coming. An elderly woman I'd helped with her groceries months earlier, just a simple act of kindness, turned out to be Marcus's mother. She was the one with access to the pageant venue's doorbell camera footage. Now she felt torn, grateful for my help, but emotionally invested in her son's relationship with Elise. She believed she was helping bring a family back together, unaware of the full picture. Within the hospital, lines were drawn. Some staff members refused to share updates, clinging to strict rules in the face of family conflict. Others quietly slipped me information, whispered updates on Tessa's condition, Elise's visits, timelines. The division within the medical team mirrored the larger war playing out around Tessa's hospital bed. And still, the legal hurdle remained steep. Clear and convincing evidence, not suspicion, not instinct, not even professional concern. Every piece I collected, every record, every video, every statement was put under a microscope. Opposing counsel offered alternative interpretations, insisted on plausible deniability. The legal system built to protect families had become a wall I was constantly slamming into while trying to protect one child. Then, out of nowhere, an unlikely ally stepped forward. One of my mother's old rivals from the pageant circuit, now running a child advocacy center. She owed Mom a long-ago favor and offered background data, documented risks in pageantry, stats on eating disorders, patterns of psychological harm. But she wouldn't testify without a subpoena, and she wouldn't voluntarily accept one. In discovery, we found something heartbreaking. Search history from Tessa's school computer. How to make mommy happy. What happens if you don't eat? She'd been researching her own abuse. She knew what was happening wasn't right, but she chose her mother's approval over her own well-being. The counselor's archived notes gave further clarity. Months of concern over Tessa's weight, anxiety, emotional shifts, a pattern. The counselor agreed to testify. Finally, we had real external support, but Elise's lawyer was ready. She would question the counselor's qualifications, the absence of a mandatory report, the delay in acting. More evidence surfaced. Texts to friends saying she was scared, searches about diuretics, prayers posted to a private social media page. Tessa knew. She knew what the pills could do, but she took them anyway. out of fear, out of loyalty, out of love. Facing that truth shattered something in me, because it meant that Tessa hadn't just been a victim. She'd made impossible choices, terrible choices for a child to have to make, but choices nonetheless. Justice now meant more than punishment. It meant recognizing the twisted love embedded in the abuse. It meant creating a future where Tessa could heal without being torn from the only mother she'd ever known. Full termination of Elise's parental rights would destroy her daughter, not protect her. My focus shifted. No longer about destroying Elise, but about building safeguards strong enough to stop the cycle and allow healing to begin. Elise's sworn affidavit painted everything as normal pageant preparation, just another devoted mom going the extra mile. But it was unraveling. Medical records, witness reports, digital footprints, they all revealed something much darker, a consistent pattern of escalating control and damage. Her attorney leaned on cultural normalization, said the training methods were competitive standard, but the health records told a different story, one of malnutrition, organ stress, and emotional trauma. When it came time to present everything, I had to let go of rage. No tears, no fury, just facts. I stood in that courtroom, heart pounding, and laid out every document, every timestamp, every record with precision. Elise sat across from me, watching me. I didn't meet her gaze. I kept my voice calm, measured, detached. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about survival. Tessa's.
The signs that the trap was closing in became more obvious in Elise's behavior. She compulsively washed her hands between testimonies, her calm veneer beginning to crack. Medical experts took the stand one by one. They spoke about the dangers of diuretics in children, the long-term effects of malnutrition, the psychological damage caused by extreme performance pressure. Each expert faced aggressive cross-examination, attempts to downplay their conclusions, to suggest the behavior fell within the norms of competitive parenting. But it didn't work. Taken together, the evidence was devastating. No reasonable person could look at the facts and call it normal pageant preparation. Then came an unexpected voice, a fellow pageant mom, breaking ranks. She testified about a conversation overheard in a bathroom. Tessa had whispered that her mom would cry if she ate anything before the competition. The woman had daughters of her own in pageants. That comment had haunted her for months. She didn't know how to intervene then, but she did now. Her testimony provided critical, independent confirmation of what had previously only come from family and medical professionals. Psychological evaluations were ordered for everyone involved. Elise's results showed traits consistent with narcissistic personality disorder, paired with genuine maternal attachment. Mine revealed PTSD symptoms connected to Dad's death. Emotional intensity, yes, but my observations remained factually grounded. Ryan's evaluation confirmed what we already knew. He was stable, trustworthy, and fit to serve as guardian. The videos Elise had tried to delete, recovered and authenticated by Ryan's tech-savvy brother, became the turning point. They showed her forcing Tessa to continue brutal workouts despite her clear exhaustion. Timestamps proved it was not an isolated incident. It had gone on for months. It was hard to watch. Harder still to deny. The evidence confirmed child endangerment while also exposing Elise's warped perception of what she thought was helping. She genuinely believed pageants were Tessa's only shot at opportunity, a reflection of her own dreams deferred by teen motherhood. It didn't excuse what she'd done, but it explained the belief system that made the abuse possible. Love twisted by obsession was still abuse. But understanding Elise's motivation added painful complexity. When Elise finally broke down during her own testimony, her delusion laid bare. She sobbed openly about how pageants were meant to give her daughter the life she had lost. How every rule she broke, every extreme she pushed, was for her success. Her sincerity made her more dangerous, not less. The judge's questions about future custody arrangements revealed the direction the court was heading. Rehabilitation, not retribution. My input suddenly carried weight, not just as a witness, but as someone proposing a way forward. I surprised everyone, even Elise, by recommending mandatory therapy and supervised visitation rather than full termination of parental rights. Tessa didn't need her mother erased, she needed her mother to change. Complete destruction would only deepen the trauma. Hope, real hope, required boundaries, safety, and the chance for healing. Temporary custody was granted to Ryan, with authorization for me to serve as legal guardian during his work travel. It created the stability Tessa needed without disrupting Ryan's career, and gave me a continuing role in her recovery. Elisa's visitation rights would depend on her completion of a court-mandated treatment plan, behavioral benchmarks, parenting classes, family therapy. The extended family fractured in the fallout. Some had noticed red flags and done nothing, protecting peace over protection. Others were blindsided, having truly believed Elise's curated public persona. Rifts formed that wouldn't be easy to mend. I started trauma therapy myself, even as I supported Tessa's through hers. Some relatives cut off contact entirely, blaming me for tearing the family apart. Others stepped forward in quiet solidarity, acknowledging the courage it took to challenge dysfunction. The cost of choosing safety over silence was now fully visible. The restraining order against Elise included terms for future visitation, supervised with strict criteria. Sustained behavioral change would be required. Not just compliance, transformation. 3 weeks passed, the crisis no longer immediate, but recovery just beginning. Tessa was back home, with her father. Slowly she began to heal, physically and emotionally. Elise entered the mandated treatment program, her first true step toward confronting the delusions that had nearly destroyed her daughter. And me, I was no longer the same. I had chosen truth over comfort, protection over peace. And I understood now that sometimes real love means making impossible choices. Our first family dinner was scheduled under tight supervision and strict safety protocols. Just a small step, but maybe the first step towards something different, something better.
The answers I needed were buried in the school's computer lab. Tessa's teacher had agreed to meet me there early, before classes started. She brought the archived emails she'd mentioned and unlocked the lab door with quiet determination. The ancient desktop took its time booting up, the monitor flickering to life with a dull hum. Then the screen filled with documented concern, months of it. Email after email, each one detailing Tessa's declining health, weight loss noticed in PE, fatigue during morning reading, anxiety attacks just before lunch. The teacher had reached out to Elise multiple times. Each message was carefully worded, concerned but non-accusatory. Elise's replies were equally careful. Talk of growth spurts, a busy schedule, normal childhood stress. It was all smoke, all deflection. Then the teacher opened another file, internet search history from Tessa's assigned school computer. The results turned my stomach. Questions about calorie counts, how long someone could survive without eating, what happens when your heart stops. A 10-year-old trying to understand the damage being done to her, preparing, maybe, for the worst. My phone buzzed with a message from Ryan. The doorbell camera footage from the pageant venue had been corrupted. Marcus's mother claimed a power surge had wiped the files. The timing was painfully convenient. Another piece of evidence, gone. The custody hearing was now just days away. I spent the afternoon surrounded by papers, screenshots, medical forms, photos, anything that hadn't already been lost or discredited. The stack of documents felt massive, and still not enough. The record showed the outcome, damage done, but proving Elisa's intent, her pattern of behavior, was a steeper climb. That night, Ryan's brother showed up at my motel room with a laptop and 2 external drives. He'd pulled fragments from a cloud backup Elise had forgotten to scrub. His fingers flew across the keyboard, calling up folders, files, video after video. Each file bore a timestamp, each one another piece in a 6-month timeline of escalation. The first clip was deceptively mild. Tessa doing jumping jacks in the garage, Elise's voice calmly counting in the background. But then, on screen, 2 hours, the timer running the whole time. 2 straight hours. Another video showed Tessa stumbling on the treadmill while Elise's voice told her she could rest when she's burned enough. They only got worse from there. Ryan's brother explained the metadata, the digital fingerprints tying each clip to a time, a place. He backed everything up across multiple encrypted drives, uploaded it to secure servers. We couldn't afford to lose any more truth. The Guardian ad litem scheduled another interview. This time she met us at the hospital where Tessa was still recovering. She asked about my relationship with Tessa, my employment history, my housing situation. Each question felt like a test, each answer a potential landmine. I tried to stay calm, to be clear, but I knew Elise's attorney would dissect every word later. Tessa's condition had stabilized enough for a private interview. I waited outside, watching through the small window in the door. Tessa's small hands moved as she spoke. She wiped at tears, nodded, hesitated. The Guardian's face remained composed, neutral, giving away nothing. Then came Elise's psychological evaluation. Her attorney delivered it with a confident smile. The report described Elise as a loving, devoted mother under extreme stress. It framed her behavior as an emotional reaction to her daughter's accident and to my aggressive interference. No mention of starvation, no mention of abuse, no mention of diuretics. The evaluator had bought her act completely. My own report felt more honest and more dangerous. Yes, I struggled with unresolved grief over our father's death. Yes, I had difficulty trusting authority. Yes, I showed signs of anxiety and hypervigilance. Understandable trauma responses, the evaluator noted, but still potentially destabilizing in a custody case. Then another fragile but crucial thread came through. The pageant mother, the one who overheard Tessa in the bathroom, agreed to provide a sworn statement. We met at a public library, so she'd feel safe. Her voice shook as she described it again, how Tessa had whispered that her mom would cry if she ate before the competition. "I've lost sleep over it," she admitted. I didn't know what to do back then." Now she did. And finally, someone outside the family was helping tell the truth.
More witnesses began to step forward, people I never expected. A pageant photographer who had noticed Tessa's progressive weight loss across several competitions. A makeup artist who remembered having to apply increasingly heavy concealer beneath her eyes to hide the dark circles. Each had only seen part of the puzzle, isolated pieces they hadn't thought much of, until now. Suddenly, those fragments formed a picture. Elise's attorney responded the only way she knew how, by filing motion after motion. Motions to exclude evidence, motions to dismiss witness testimony, motions to challenge procedural integrity. Every filing required a formal response, legal fees, late nights, drained time and energy. It felt strategic, an endless war of attrition designed to break us through paperwork alone. The day before the hearing, I visited Tessa one last time. She was propped up in bed, coloring in a book Ryan had brought. When I entered, she looked up and carefully set her crayon aside. We sat quietly, her tiny hand tucked into mine. We didn't need to speak. We both knew what the next day might bring. The courthouse the following morning felt cavernous, each hallway echoing with quiet tension. Elise was already there, surrounded by her carefully curated circle of supporters. She wore a modest dress, her hair pulled into a soft bun, every detail calculated to project quiet maternal strength. Our eyes met briefly. She turned away and leaned toward her attorney, whispering something I couldn't hear. The courtroom filled slowly. Pageant families clustered on one side, teachers, hospital staff, and mandated reporters on the other. The physical divide reflected the emotional one. Everyone had chosen a side, whether they'd wanted to or not.
The bailiff called the room to order as the judge entered. Opening statements began. Elise's attorney went first, painting her as a misunderstood single mother, driven by love, misunderstood by a jealous, emotionally unstable sister seeking control of a child not her own. Then it was our turn. My lawyer focused on the hard facts: medical documentation, psychological patterns, expert reports. He described a child pushed to the edge of death under the guise of achievement. The first witness was Tessa's primary care physician. She testified to the severity of the weight loss, the signs of starvation, the traces of dangerous diuretics. Elise's attorney challenged her, implying that these symptoms could stem from a genetic condition, one Elise had mentioned in passing. Medical experts followed. A pediatric cardiologist explained how diuretics could trigger cardiac arrest in children. A nutritionist outlined the long-term effects of extreme calorie restriction during developmental years. A toxicologist confirmed the dosage of diuretics in Tessa's bloodstream was not just inappropriate, it was life-threatening. Then came Elise's witnesses, pageant mothers. They spoke about the competitive nature of the circuit, about how all mothers encouraged their daughters. They described Elise as devoted, no more intense than anyone else. Their testimonies felt choreographed, each one reinforcing the same lines, the same reassurances. Then the videos came. Ryan's brother took the stand to explain the authentication process. He detailed the metadata, the cloud backups, the recovery process. And then, for 40 minutes, the courtroom watched 6 months of silent suffering. Tessa forced to exercise beyond exhaustion. Elise's voice behind the camera, pushing, insisting, denying her food. Clip after clip, command after command. The judge remained composed, but others couldn't. People turned away. Some left the courtroom. Elise took the stand next. She spoke about her sacrifices as a mother, her love, her dreams. She cried when describing her own teen pregnancy, how she just wanted her daughter to have opportunities she never did. She admitted she'd been too focused on performance, but denied any intent to hurt Tessa. Every tear fell right on cue. Her voice cracked at the perfect moments. But cross-examination exposed the fractures. The missed doctor's appointments, the emails she ignored, the videos she couldn't explain. When asked about texts in which she demanded Tessa shed the last few pounds, Elise faltered. She claimed confusion, miscommunication, lapses in memory. Then the school counselor took the stand. She spoke clearly, firmly. She talked about the emotional changes in Tessa, the rising anxiety, the quiet dread. She shared records of meetings she'd requested, the emails she'd sent Elise asking to discuss concerns. Each one had been dismissed. Overreaction, unnecessary worry, interference. And just like that, the courtroom began to shift. Not in volume, not in chaos, but in weight. The weight of truth.
The counselor's notes from Tessa's sessions revealed the full extent of her fear of disappointing her mother, of not being enough. She had been willing to endure anything for Elise's approval. My testimony came near the end of the proceedings. I spoke clearly and steadily, recounting how I discovered the abuse, the hospital visit, and Elise's relentless campaign to discredit me. I focused on facts, not feelings. Elise's attorney went on the offensive, pointing to my absence from Tessa's life, to my history of grief-fueled paranoia after my father's death. She suggested I had ulterior motives, jealousy, control, maybe even a personal vendetta. Then came the Guardian ad litem's report. She had interviewed everyone, reviewed every record, watched every video, and spent hours with Tessa. Her recommendation held significant weight. She spoke of the complicated emotional terrain, of the real, undeniable bond between mother and daughter, twisted, distorted, but present. She emphasized the urgent need for intervention to protect Tessa, while leaving open the possibility of preserving family connections if it could be done safely. Then came closing arguments. Elise's attorney made one final attempt to reframe the abuse as misguided love, asserting that I was the real danger to family stability, a woman unraveling under the weight of old wounds. My attorney responded with a meticulous review of the evidence, the video footage, the medical testimony, the psychological assessments, the email records, the texts, the timeline. He asked the judge to look beyond performance, to see the truth underneath. When the judge retired to consider the case, time stretched impossibly long. Elise sat surrounded by her supporters, dabbing her eyes. I sat beside Ryan, neither of us speaking. We both knew that whatever came next would define not only Tessa's future, but the fate of our entire family. Tessa remained at the hospital, protected from the proceedings, but deeply woven into every word spoken in that courtroom. When the judge returned, the room fell silent. His ruling was deliberate and precise. He acknowledged Elise's love for her daughter, but that love had been warped into something dangerous. The pattern of behavior, he said, was not an isolated lapse. It was sustained, escalating, and if allowed to continue, potentially fatal. Temporary custody was awarded to Ryan, with legal authorization for me to serve as guardian when his work required travel. Elise's parental rights were not terminated, but they were severely restricted. She would have no unsupervised access to Tessa until completing a structured treatment plan. Intensive therapy, focused on narcissistic behaviors and distorted thinking. Parenting classes centered on healthy child development. Routine substance screening to prevent misuse of medications. Supervised visitation only advancing upon therapist recommendation and court review. Financial matters came next. Elise would remain responsible for medical expenses related to the abuse, though actual collection seemed unlikely given her financial standing. Child support would be reevaluated once she demonstrated progress and steady employment. The pageant earnings previously held in trust were transferred to Ryan's control for Tessa's future care. The judge also addressed the wider family dynamic. He recommended family therapy for all involved, stressing that the goal was eventual healing, not permanent estrangement. But he clarified, Tessa's safety would always come first. Elise didn't break down. There were no tears, no outbursts. She sat still as her attorney whispered the ruling in her ear. Her face cycled through emotion, shock, anger, sorrow, and something that might have been relief. For the first time in months, she looked tired, not composed, not calculating, just tired. The aftermath unfolded quickly. Ryan signed the necessary paperwork. I collected certified copies of the orders. Elise left with her lawyer, her supporters trailing behind. Some looked visibly shaken, even relieved. Others were still convinced she had been wrongly attacked. The pageant community would remain fractured for a long time. At the hospital, Ryan and I explained the outcome to Tessa. She sat quietly, listening, as he gently told her she would be living with him now, that I'd be around often, and that she'd see her mother again, but only when it was safe. Her questions were heartbreakingly simple. Will Mommy be okay? Can I still dance? Is anyone mad at me?
The medical team began preparing Tessa's discharge plan. Physical therapy to rebuild her strength, nutritional counseling to reestablish healthy eating habits, ongoing psychological support to begin processing the trauma. The road ahead would be long, but she was young and resilient. With the right support, the doctors assured us, she could heal. Moving her belongings out of Elise's house required careful planning. We arrived with a sheriff's deputy to ensure things remained civil. The rooms were untouched, frozen in time. Trophies still lined the shelves, dresses hung by color. Training schedules remained taped to the mirror like offerings in a shrine to ambition that had nearly cost a child her life. We packed only the essentials: clothes, school supplies, her favorite stuffed animals. The pageant gear stayed behind for now. Decisions about it deferred until Tessa was older, when she could choose what to keep, what to let go. Some items, photo albums, baby books, old drawings, were placed in storage, symbols of a complicated past that might one day matter again. Back at Ryan's house, things had to shift. We transformed the spare room into a permanent space for Tessa. She chose purple walls, glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling. Small choices, maybe, but for her they were enormous. Freedoms she'd never had before. The first week was hard.
Night terrors disrupted sleep. Meal times caused anxiety. Even simple choices, what to wear, what snack to eat, were overwhelming. But slowly, a rhythm emerged. School in the mornings, homework in the afternoons, dinner together in the evenings. No scales, no treadmill, no performance expectations, just life. Elise entered the court-mandated therapy program, a facility that specialized in personality disorders. The initial reports were expected, resistant, guarded, defensive, but eventually she began to engage. Her therapist would later describe the painstaking process of breaking through Elise's denial, confronting the inherited patterns of control and pressure, helping her understand how love had been twisted into domination. The extended family adapted, slowly. Some relatives tried to keep ties with both Elise and the rest of us, navigating a difficult emotional landscape. Others drew hard lines, creating deep rifts that would echo through holidays and birthdays for years to come. But Tess's safety came first, always. 3 weeks after the hearing, she met Elise again for the first supervised visitation. A neutral setting, a social worker present, structured activities. They cried, both of them, but it was calm, safe. A first tentative step towards something that might one day be called reconciliation. My role shifted. I wasn't in emergency mode anymore. I became a steady presence. I found work that allowed flexibility, for pickups, for doctor's visits, for anything Tessa might need. The fierce custody battle gave way to homework help, art projects, school newsletters, and the small responsibilities that suddenly felt extraordinary. Ryan juggled work and parenting with quiet determination. His employer supported remote work when needed. His ex-wife came around, eventually allowing Tessa to interact carefully with their children. Another family slowly widening its circle. Recovery wasn't linear. Some days were bright and full of laughter, others were fogged with flashbacks and triggers. A glimpse of a pageant on TV could send her spiraling. Certain foods remained off-limits emotionally. Trust came slowly, but it came. Weight returned. So did laughter. And interests, drawing, science, music that had nothing to do with competing or winning. Financial stress began to ease. Insurance covered most of the medical care after we met the deductible. The funds in trust from her pageant winnings helped cover therapy and unexpected needs. Elise's court-ordered financial contributions were mostly theoretical, but we managed. Money mattered less than safety and peace. 6 months later, Tessa stood on the stage at her school's talent show. She chose to sing, not to compete, not to impress, just to sing. She wore her favorite dress, no rhinestones, no glitter, no choreography, just her voice. Just joy. The audience clapped not because she won anything, but because they were happy for her. I sat watching her from the back row. Ryan stood filming on his phone. Elise wasn't there, but maybe one day she'd watch the video in therapy. Tessa looked strong. She looked free. She looked like the child she should have always been allowed to be. The road ahead would still be long, but she was walking it now, on her own terms.
Adolescence would bring its own challenges to the custody arrangement. Elise's progress in therapy would eventually push against new boundaries, testing what healing might truly look like. Tessa would need to process her trauma more deeply as she grew, confronting pieces of her past with greater understanding. But for now, she was safe, she was loved, and she was learning that her worth had nothing to do with winning. That night's family dinner was just Ryan, Tessa, and me, gathered around the table, free of tension. We talked about school, weekend plans, favorite meals, ordinary things, miraculous things. Somewhere else, Elise was likely sitting in a therapy session of her own, working toward the day she might sit at a table like this again. Our family would never be the same, but it wasn't broken beyond repair. Sometimes protection means distance.
Sometimes love means stepping back. And sometimes the battles worth fighting don't end in triumph, but in quiet, unexpected peace.